Okay, Sean, the recording has started, Mr. Chair, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Sean Toomey, for those that I don't know, or the new chair of our committee. And if we want to start off by a quick roll call, please, Carl.
You got it. So, Mr. Chair, I've got you. Tim Deal, I saw you, Mr. Vice Chair. Brian Adams, are you on?
I'm here.
Thank you, Chief. Marshall Black, are you on? Ted Black. Moving on, Rick Boisford, are you on? Chief Collins, I saw you.
Good morning.
Marshall Desrochers, I've got you. Chief Hyde, I saw you. Ed Kaminsky, I've got your attendance, as well as Chief King. Jonathan Lund is going to be absent today. He's at an IFSTA board meeting. Chief McShane, are you with us?
I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, sir. We've got the New England covered today. Marshall Medina, Larry Medina, are you with us? Marshall Nelson, I saw you. Good to see you, Doug. Kelly Nicolello, I've got you. Christine Reed, I've got you. Let's see here. Chief Wassom, I've got you. And got Chief Metz from the board. Myself and Tim Schmitz, I believe you were on as well. I believe that constitutes a quorum. One quick question that I have for the crowd. I know that Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs, Chief Lefevre, I believe. Are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much. I think I'll
nice.
step in lieu of Tina going forward.
Yes, sir. Great to have you with us. Welcome. And we'll do a little more of a formal welcome when we get the meeting kicked off here. So, Marshall Toomey, the floor is yours. We do have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. So, yeah, Chief, welcome to the Governing Committee. Pleased to have you representing the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs with us, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you down in Florida or for our in-person to work with you a little bit more. Thanks for being here today. So we have a couple of guest presentations. We're going to jump off and do one with Rob Neale here in just a second, and then we're going to ask the FCAC update closer to 2 o'clock because we're waiting for one member to jump on and help with that presentation. So Rob, if you're ready, we'll be happy to have you give us a quick rundown of the survey you're working on for the fire protection system acceptance testing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having me on the meeting today. I'm really thrilled to see the participation level you've got going on the Fire Service Membership Council. It's very rewarding to see all that. I promise to keep this short. Some of you may know me. I was working at the National Fire Academy for a number of years in Emmitsburg. I was blessed with the opportunity to spend some time with International Code Council, kind of as predecessor to your Dr. Fippinger there. And now I'm sort of in transitional retirement. I'm not really ready to quit, but I don't want to, work full time either. So to make a long story short, I have a client. I'm doing some consulting work, and I have a client who was ruminating on their policy of fire protection system testing, and predominantly with fire alarm systems, but this is really applicable to all different systems. They currently require 100% acceptance testing be witnessed by the fire department. And the question came up was, is that the appropriate amount, and what do other people do? Some people don't witness at all. Some rely entirely on the contractor. Some test 50%. There's numbers all over the place. So what I told them, and this is entirely pro bono, I'm not making any money off of this. I told them what I'd do is put together about a 10-question survey and see if I could collect some data on what other jurisdictions are doing. So the reason for the call today is it seems to me that the Fire Service Membership Council would be a good place to start with that. And I'm hoping for permission from the council to send the survey link to Carl and then have him retransmit it to all of you, and perhaps you could all retransmit it to some folks on your list. I would close the survey by March 1, so it wouldn't be a long-standing thing. And the quid pro quo would be I'd put together an article for Building Safety Journal on what the results of the test were, or results of the survey. So like I say, I'm not making any money off of it. If the answer is no, you don't hurt my feelings. But it might be kind of interesting to see what other folks are doing so that when we do go to our own employees and supervisors, we can say, hey, we've got some data to share. So that's my presentation, very short. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on the have any questions for Rob at all? Or any thoughts? I know it's been a long time since I've done an acceptance test on my own, but it was always kind of contingent on how the test was going. It seemed to be some days we would do a small amount, other times we would do the whole 100%. But I know that was a factor we would consider, and I think the inspectors of my office kind of continue to follow that mindset. But Joe, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, Joe McElwain with the Hiller Company. We're a fire protection life safety contractor. We do see a variety of things. I think, you know, for us, it typically depends upon if it's a new construction or a TI, or if we're reprogramming the fire alarm control panel. Typically, most AHJs, if we reprogram the fire alarm panel, it's 100% testing, including all those subsystems from dampers, doors, smoke control, to make sure they are working properly, because those are critical pieces of that fire alarm system, right? And TIs is typically the TI area, and maybe one or two outside the TI area that I call, that's not in our contract. And I think that's the question or issue that I typically see in our company typically sees. The challenge sometimes is the AHA wants us to test things that are not inside our scope of work, so we have to tell the owner change order, and I think that's the challenge sometimes we face. That's my two thoughts.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anybody else? Pretty quiet. Anyone opposed to sharing a link out at all? Speak up at all. If not, we can share that out. I'm okay with it, but if anyone has any opposition or thoughts, I'm happy to hear that, and we can figure it out. Pretty quiet. Crickets. All right, Rob, thank you. If you want to share that with Carl, and we'll share it out to the group, and then if people are open to it, they can share it out to their other groups and see what kind of information you get, and we'd be pleased to look forward to hearing any of the results when it comes back. All right, so I just got a
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do that.
All right, thank you very much. Backing up a little bit, Ted Black's joined us, I see. Ted's new also to the Governing Committee, and Ted, welcome you to the committee. And
thank you. I apologize for being late. I had some computer problems.
Yeah, they like to act up when trying to jump on meetings, it seems like. And then it sounds like our 2 o'clock appointment can move up to now. So Robert Marshall and Beth Tubbs are here to give us an update on the FCAC actual work and for the Group A co-development cycle, and just kind of give us a highlight of what's to come. So I'm not sure who wants to lead off, but look forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. How's everybody? Hope everybody's doing well and that you're staying relatively warm, except for Kelly Nicolello. He's from Alaska, so he can handle whatever's thrown at him, I'm sure.
Yeah, I wish. Not anymore.
Yeah, now that you're in Texas, you probably lost all your Alaska skin, right?
Yeah, 8 years removed. Yeah, it's
yeah.
And any antifreeze I had in the body is gone.
For sure. Well, anyway, hey, thanks for having us. I am Robert Marshall. I am Deputy Fire Chief with the San Mateo Consolidated Fire Department in California, just south of San Francisco. If you ever fly into San Francisco International Airport, you fly right over my office. I could actually stand on a balcony and wave to you as your landing gear is coming down. Next time you're there, look for me, and if you see me waving, it is definitely because I know you're on the flight, and I was waving specifically to you. So also I have served this year as the chair of the Fire Code Action Committee. And we just finished up our work. It was all due for submission on January 8th. And I wanted to, I'll introduce Beth here now. And she can probably tell you more about the meetings and the work groups and kind of like the big picture stuff of what we did. And then I'll cover some of the key areas of interest that we kind of went over. Beth was, as always, was good enough to kind of put together an email for us to work off of to kind of just put together what it is that we did. But first, the one thing that isn't on this agenda, and I know Carl knew this was coming, but Beth didn't know this was coming, is just I wanted to take an opportunity as the chair of the FCAC to publicly thank Beth for the work that she does on our behalf. She is absolutely unbelievable. The work that she does to keep us in line, to keep me in line, to keep me focused and help me figure out what it is that we're doing on a given meeting, what it is that we need to talk to, how we're doing on time, you know, if we need to speed something up. I think those of you, there's quite a few of you who have been on these meetings, and sometimes when you hear me say, hey folks, we need to move along, it's because Beth has been shooting me a message or something saying, I'm really worried we're not going to get through this. And I'm like, have no fear, Beth, I'm going to get us through this, and we're going to do that. And you know, we were able to submit a number of proposals, and she'll tell you about all that here in a minute. But the reason that we were able to do that is because Beth is an absolute rock star at what she does, and knowing this process, and even with the process being different this year, which is different for all of us, and she's learning right alongside of us. So Beth, thank you so much for making my job so easy coming into this. And you know, I was worried, I don't think I told any of you this, but I was worried coming into this because I had to fill in the shoes of Mike O'Brien. And I think I've been, at least so far, somewhat successful in getting things done. We got us to this point, but the reason I was able to do that is because of Beth and Beth's help. Kim Parlberg to a certain extent as well, but she's the BCAC people and we don't like the BCAC. So it's much more about FCAC and what Beth does. So, but thank you very much, Beth, for everything that you did, getting us to the point that we're at. And it's an absolute pleasure to work with you. And honestly, I think that I probably would not have accepted the job if it weren't for the fact that I already knew that you were kind of a rock star and that you'd help me through the process. It would have been a much different thing if I had to accept it and somebody else was running it. So thank you very much on that. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Beth, and you can talk about the, you know, the FCAC in general and what our charge is and all the work groups and all that kind of stuff, that first part of the email, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, just kind of keep on going, and we got a lot done this year. When I actually looked at, I hadn't really sat back and really looked at how many times we had met. I never added it up, and but I mean, just quickly, those of you who aren't familiar with the code action committees, I won't go into too much detail, but I mean, there is sometimes confusion between the code action committees and the code development committees. And the code action committees are these committees where we get a chance to kind of dig in and see where we need to kind of put our resources, discuss, get industry involved, interested parties. All of those people are essential to us being successful and doing things that actually make sense in the world and pull everybody together, work together. I think I have closer to almost, I don't know, at least 350 people on my email list that just listen in or participate or whatever in what we do. But we are charged with putting together proposals to put through the process and follow those proposals through. Just like the Building Code Action Committee, we have the SEPCAC, which is Sustainability and High Performing Buildings, and we have the Plumbing, Mechanical, Fuel Gas, PMG CAC, that also submit proposals. FCAC is probably, I don't know, we're pretty busy. We're pretty energized and do a lot. So there was 13 actual FCAC meetings over, well, including January 4th and 5th, right before the deadline in 23, if you add those all in. One was in person, which was very useful at the time that we had it. There are 7 work groups, passive fire protection, active fire protection, administration, and ITM, energy technology, special uses, hazardous materials, and wildland urban interface issues, which I'm really excited too. There was a lot more activity on the WUI code this year. The most code changes I think we have ever received on that code. Just in terms of the code change side, there's over like something on the order of 77 code changes or so. We've had 120 work group meetings based on my list of meetings. I never added them up between all 7 groups. It's kind of fairly evenly distributed. So it was very busy, and those work groups worked hard. Some of those were often 2-hour meetings, trying to work through all the details. Ultimately, and this probably took me longer to submit all of these than I thought they would, because we had 123 proposals. I think last cycle was around 80. And there's 6 BCAC proposals that were also included on in addition to those 123. So BCAC did the work for those. We just kind of said yay or nay or gave them some advice. And then the scoping proposal, which Robert probably spent way more time than he anticipated on that one, because it was an effort kind of that all the CACs were involved in to redo a lot of the scoping to make it more consistent throughout the codes. So you'll see it's fairly administrative, but a really good cleanup effort that I still actually need to make sure I'm paying attention to as I see new code changes come in and things like that. So in terms of our activity level, it was busy. We were very productive. And the work group, 7 workers, I think we only had 6 last time. But I think because the wildland urban interface was sort of tucked under special uses last time, but very active. So from there, Robert, I will pass it back to you to kind of talk about some of the big issues that we touched upon.
Yeah, certainly. And it was amazing because I think like you, Beth, I wasn't really aware of how many meetings it was. It did seem to me like every time I came to work and looked at my calendar, there was another work group meeting or a sub work group to one of the work groups or whatever. And to see it in numbers is actually pretty, like if you'd shown me those numbers ahead of time, it would have been really, really daunting. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. So like Beth mentioned, there were quite a few things. So what we did when we started the FCAC meetings this time around was we met with just the FCAC members just to kind of talk through some stuff and talk through like, do we have the right number of work groups, and where is the work going to be done and how are we going to do that? Because we only met once in person. So, so we knew we had a lot of work to do on the stuff that we wanted to make sure that we kind of did. And so we had that pre-meeting where we kind of said, okay, these are some things that we know from FCAC from before that need some tuning up, right? And then some things that we know that we want to apply that we couldn't apply last time. And here's some new issues that we need to look for. And so that was kind of how we started. And then as you start to talk about stuff, you get into different things and you figure out that, okay, well, there's more work that needs to be done on that. And then other people have ideas. So Beth mentioned the scoping proposal, which I think will probably be overall, and Beth can probably agree with this as well, but I think the scoping proposal, so that came across as a code correlation committee, which is kind of an overarching committee for big issues that affect all of the codes. And they identified that if you've ever, which I'm sure all of you have, if you've ever spent time in the codes, you'll see that the scopes of every chapter are very, very different in how they're approached. If you've got a newer chapter, the scope may not necessarily follow along with how, an older chapter was done. And from the onset of the international codes in 2006, or actually before that, when we started merging all of the codes, whether it was the Southern Building Code or BOCA or the uniform codes or what have you, we would pick a chapter and the chapter would come in, and whatever the scopes were of those chapters were kind of how they were, and there wasn't a lot of attention paid to that. And so somebody said, well, like, okay, there's a difference between if you shall comply with this chapter versus everything shall be in accordance with this chapter. Like, can you really enforce something if it needs to be in accordance with, as opposed to you shall comply? And what is the directional language there? And how do you handle exceptions? Like, here it's an exception, there it is a non-applicability. Over here, it's this is a chapter where you've got a choice to either use this chapter or use the regular chapter. You know, the hazmat chapters were all very different in how they approached that, just as an example. And then you had like the Wildland Urban Interface Code, which is a newer code overall. It wasn't based on a previous code. It was written, you know, completely, and they had scopes which were more like notes on how do you use the chapter, and then there were a secondary thing where you had these objectives, like what is the objective of the chapter. And so, you know, we came up with this thing where we were going to standardize how that language is. And so one of the proposals that you will see, and I'm not sure if Beth and if you guys have figured out how you're going to do this for the hearing or not, but every single scoping provision in all of the codes is going to be addressed this cycle, with the exception of Chapter 1. And Chapter 2 doesn't really have a scope, but Chapter 3 and up of every single code, whether it's the Wildland Urban Interface Code, the Fire Code, the Building Code, the existing building code, the mechanical code, we're doing it for all of them. So that is one huge proposal that, and each CAC is co-sponsoring that. So for the FCAC, we're doing the Fire Code and the Wildland Urban Interface Code. BCAC is doing the Building Code. PMG CAC is doing Plumbing, Mechanical, and the Fuel Gas Code, and so on. So we're doing that for every single code. And that, as Beth mentioned, that was a heavy, heavy lift. And we knew it was going to be a heavy lift. And then we got in and go, wow, this is heavy, as we kind of got into it. And you know, one of the other things that was kind of challenging in that is that the Fire Code, as I think all of you know, wasn't released right away. And so we couldn't get the electronic version of it. That wasn't until December, I think, is when it finally came out. We had it in CDP Access, but when we started the project, we didn't even have that. And so we had to kind of go through chapter by chapter of the 2020 or the 2021 code rather. And then when I got into it, we did all these changes, and then we got into it and realized that some of the scopes had changed. So now we had to kind of start over again, and kind of went through it all and went through all of the chapters to kind of figure that out and rewrite them. And I'm sure we missed stuff because it's, you know, again, it's every single chapter in both of those codes. And so that was a huge thing. But ultimately, it's going to wind up to be a really good thing. I think that it makes the code much, much clearer. In a lot of cases, and this is something that you hardly ever hear, right? But in a lot of cases, we actually shortened things. So the books will be marginally shorter, kind of moving forward. So, and then it's amazing when you start to look at the scopes, you start to look at things that are like, wow, I never really knew that that was part of the scope of this chapter, or wow, I always thought that was part of the scope of this chapter, and it wasn't, and you were never actually empowered to make some of those decisions, even though you had some of those things in the code. So hopefully that is all fixed, and we'll see how it goes. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of time spent on that when we actually get to the code hearings, to you know, to kind of figure that out and figure out what is appropriate and how we want to make it look, and hopefully make it better use for. And that was the whole point of this set of proposals, was to make it better for the end user of the code. So we did a lot of things in as far as areas of interest. We did a lot of clarification of the applicability of NFPA 285 testing, AFFF deletion throughout the code. As a lot of you know, the AFFF has problems. And so we actually deleted the AFFF throughout the code and just went to the kind of generic stuff with just foam systems and kind of going there. We did some stuff with regard to mass notification, and particularly as it applies to when a lockdown is required and the notification risks and how you do that. Smoke alarm locations. So a lot of stuff has changed in where smoke alarms need to be located. So we kind of correlated that. So Chapter 11, and if any of you have ever used Chapter 11 in the fire code, you know that that is for essentially retrofit applications. When do you need to comply with this code? And the language was really very strange in there in how would you apply it? How would it work out? How would you ultimately apply Chapter 11? And could you apply Chapter 11? When is it going to be retroactive versus when is it something that you want to do? And the biggest thing was one of the complaints of industry, and this actually was an industry proposal. I can't remember, was it, Beth, do you remember, was it John Catlett or Steve Orlowski that proposed this? It was one of the two of them.
John
That got
Catlett.
into this. It's John, yeah. So, so John had proposed it, and he had noticed, just working on the private industry side, that us as AHJs were not being necessarily appropriate in our application of Chapter 11. And meaning that like somebody could comply with Chapter 11, and then there would be a fire marshal somewhere who would say, I don't care if you just complied with Chapter 11, you need to comply with it again because this changed. And I think most reasonable code officials wouldn't apply the code that way, but there are code officials out there who would. And so we clarified the language in Chapter 11, and that took a lot. That was actually a much bigger lift than I think I had anticipated there. And we wanted to kind of make that easier for everybody, and I hope that we've done that. Chapter 33, review and cleanup. So that is the fire safety during construction, and when do you do certain things and how do you do certain things. And especially now that there is in the latest code, the 24 code, there's actually a tie-in that allows a building official to apply some of the provisions because they're there a lot more often than we are. And allows them to kind of apply some of those provisions. And so we cleaned up a lot of stuff, made sure that it matched better with what was in the building code, which is a companion chapter to this, and tried to do a lot in relation to that. So that was a fairly big lift as well, and a very good proposal to really clean things up and, again, shorten the code. So try and make it a little bit shorter so that things are just much more clear and much more intuitive when it comes to the use. And you notice that that's kind of a theme throughout of almost everything that we've done. A lot of work on lithium ion and lithium metal battery proposals. The big lift here is to really correlate more with NFPA 855. One of the things that we ran into last cycle was NFPA 855 wasn't really ready for publication yet, and there were still a lot of things that were being worked on. And so we ran into this problem, and I'm sure Beth probably wakes up screaming in the middle of the night on occasion over the NFPA 855 stuff and the copyright language in particular. We were putting stuff into the code that was coming out of NFPA 855 and trying to put it into the IFC, and NFPA then got upset about that because they're like, well, you're using copyrighted language. You can't really do that. We've got an agreement. And then it turned into this whole thing and just mass confusion. And some of you who are older are going to understand this reference, but then we started getting pictures with circles and arrows and paragraphs on the back of each one. And it just wound up in this thing that was probably way more difficult than it needed to be. And it led to some great conversations too. I know Beth and I had a lot of conversation about if somebody's submitting a code proposal and they're submitting it to an NFPA standard and to an ICC proposal, and both of us require that you sign up or sign off on a copyright release, like what happens then? Like who goes first, and when it does go first, like then who has the copyright? And if we're proposing language to go into both documents, like how is that going to play out when we do get to those questions? And just things that are kind of bigger picture things to think about that are just kind of interesting, and it makes it really challenging when you're trying to write good code because now you have to write it maybe a little bit differently. And what are the exceptions? And like when do you go? Because ICC has never been really a code that says for this problem, go to this standard, right? Where NFPA does that a lot. If you use NFPA 1, it's a reference, right? You deal with this, but then you go to this standard and apply those standards to what it is that you're doing. Whereas in the fire code, the international code, you're actually going to go from here to this chapter. This chapter is going to tell you the way to do it, and then say, but you also have to comply with, NFPA 61 or whatever it's going to be. So that was a big thing that we were kind of doing, and particularly with the lithium ion battery stuff, that was a really big focus on that. The other thing is we moved everything. We're proposing that batteries just go into their own chapter. I believe that it goes in right now as chapter 42, but eventually it will have its own chapter number depending on how many people want to add additional chapters to the code. So take it out of chapter 12 and move it to its own chapter. We also wanted to address some things that we've seen are problems. So waste sorting is one of the areas where we're getting a lot of fires. Battery recycling facilities is another issue where batteries are coming into recycle facilities because there's money to be made there, but there's no control over the batteries when they come in. So whereas in general, batteries that are under 30% charge really don't have an issue with thermal runaway and propagation. You can control that if it's a new battery when it's being shipped and so on and so forth. But if you're dealing with batteries that are being recycled, they may be full charge when they throw them into those bins. And so you may have a fire that starts because it's a fully charged battery and now you're crushing it every time somebody throws a new battery on top of it. Or they didn't protect the terminals appropriately and it dead shorts, or whatever it is that that they're doing to those, it causes a lot of fires. So what do we do, and how do we treat those, and how should the storage facilities treat them, and when can you store them indoors, and that kind of stuff. So those are all issues that we're dealing with. Anybody who's been paying any attention knows that micromobility is probably our biggest exposure, and causes a lot of fires. It's caused a lot of fire deaths. Particularly on the East Coast. New York and Philadelphia have both had fairly large lost fires from a life perspective when it comes to micromobility. And so UL has a new standard, and a lot of people were talking about a lot of things and what does the code need to do, and where should we be putting in code prohibitions about where you can do charging of micromobility devices. One of the problems in some of the bigger cities is you've got carts or bicycles or whatever. And one of the gig economy things is you've got people who don't really work for, Uber scooters or whoever. And what they do is they will contract with them, though, and they'll go around using an app. They'll find these things that are low on charge. They'll take them back to their apartment, and they will clean out their living room, and they'll put charging racks in their living room. And then they will charge all these devices in their living room all at the same time using regular household current, running them through plug strips because they think that they need to be in plug strips, but they don't have enough plug strips. So they start daisy chaining the plug strips, and pretty soon you've got 200 or 300 devices that are all charging in an apartment, and nobody knows that that's going on. The electrical system isn't for that, and it just becomes really, really problematic and causes fires. And so that's just an example of one of the problems that we addressed. Okay. Storage expansion and clarifications that go along with that, and exemptions from Chapter 50 were kind of the other big ticket item things that we had for the micromobility, or excuse me, for the lithium ion battery and lithium metal battery proposals. Another big issue that we have been dealing with is the global harmonization standard, and how is it going to apply to the fire code? And there's a lot of controversy over this particular thing. I think everybody agrees that it's going to be a problem, and eventually, and in some cases it's a problem already. But the flip side is that the way we do it in the fire code world and the way that we do it in the GHS world are two completely different approaches. And so we did a lot of work to try and clarify things as much as we could so that people knew how to apply the code using the GHS kind of model, right? So where this was probably the biggest lift is in the definitions. And so we spent a lot of time correlating what the definitions of a flammable liquid, for example, is compared to a GHS definition, so that you were able to then crosswalk things easier from the GHS SDS world into the world of fire code application and trying to do that. That's going to be a multi-year process. I'm sure that this is going to be the next cycle that we do this. That's going to be another piece on where we go, but very controversial, a lot of talking about how do we do this appropriately. There are people who are like, no, that's different. We shouldn't do it that way. But the practical application is when we look at safety data sheets, it's going to be using all of the language that the Global Harmonization Standard or GHS stuff uses. So we're trying to crosswalk that, and it's going to just be a process, and we'll see how it all plays out this cycle. No, under the classification of no good deed goes unpunished. One of the things we identified when we started doing that was that the MAQ tables, and I think this is one of those things that a lot of us had in the back of our mind, that the MAQ tables were in a lot of cases confusing and probably not appropriate amounts and all that kind of stuff, and we needed to address that. There were some things that came up where people were applying code differently depending on where you were and who you were taught by. And so we did a lot of work to the maximum allowable quantity tables in Chapter 50 of the code, and by extension into the building code in Chapter 4, and trying to work through that, trying to get that so it's much more clear, working on the footnotes, trying to eliminate footnotes if we could and put them into the definitions of stuff, and kind of working through all that. So that was another key piece of work that we did. And then the last one in the fire code was we spent a lot of time, some of you may remember that last cycle around, we kind of went down the kind of the rabbit hole of the carbon monoxide proposal. There was a proposal that was put out by lay people, and those lay people wrote a code change proposal. And if you heard the testimony, it was heart-wrenching. I sat on the code development committee last time, and we were listening to them, and we're listening to all these stories, whether it was somebody like Sharon McNabb, for instance, who actually had a problem with carbon monoxide, and her life was completely altered because of it, because she had long-term brain damage from carbon monoxide exposure, to Chris Hochschild, who's another one who is one of the principal authors of the original proposal, who lost family members, and it was completely preventable. And it's one of those things, I think we've all heard the expression, or even used the expression, that a lot of times code sections are written in blood, right? There's a reason that a code section exists, and you'll hear people say all the time that somebody died because of this, and that's why it changed. And once you get involved in the code change process, I think you start to realize that that is actually not very often true. If we're putting in, like, one of the first things I talked about was the applicability of NFPA 285 testing, right? Nobody died because somebody didn't do NFPA 285 testing. Like, let's be real about that, right? But when you get into something like carbon monoxide, like, I personally lost a very close friend to carbon monoxide poisoning. But I also realized when they were making their presentation that there was no way I was going to approve it, because it was confusing, and it was written by lay people, and it wasn't going to be enforceable. So we, as the FCAC and the Fire and Life Safety section for iChiefs, kind of got together and said, hey, let's fix this. We've got the opportunity to fix this. Let's make this better. And so we went into it thinking that we were going to make some incremental changes. We had a month literally to do it. We made the changes. And then unbelievably in Pittsburgh, the membership accepted our changes, and we put it into the code. And we were expecting to get a bunch of feedback because we knew there were still some problems. And so this cycle, what we did was we went through that again and tried to fix that. And Jeff Shapiro in particular was instrumental in making that happen, because he took on the task of actually doing the writing. And Richard Roberts, who is a consultant but has been very involved. He works for as a consultant to Honeywell, and he kind of led that effort and brought all those people back together to try and fix what it is that we did. We knew that, for instance, that there was a problem in the healthcare industry and how we were doing it. And so, so now we've actually changed the approach completely, but still honoring the original proposal and what it is that we're trying to do with that. So that is a big piece of what we did. And those are kind of the major things that we did in fire code. There's a lot of other little things here and there, lots of clarifications and just cleanup of language and that kind of stuff. But those are kind of the big lift items that we had. As Beth mentioned, you know, we had a lot of proposals, and actually I didn't realize it was that many that we had done, as well as other people have done. Like the Wildland Urban Interface Code is gaining a lot of traction, and a lot of that I think is because there are people who are going to be moving forward with that code more. You know, California is looking at perhaps adopting that, and I know Wendy Collins is on here, and I appreciate her being on this call and seeing what that is. But one of California's big focuses is to try and make the Wildland Urban Interface Code match kind of some of the stuff that we do here, because we've got a lot of experience in this, and our Chapter 7A is a really good example of what works. And you know, we're trying to make the code clearer so that hopefully more people will adopt it, and we can really get you know, other people involved. So IBHS, for example, was a group that was very involved in the Wildland Urban Interface proposals, and I know they've got a whole bunch of proposals on their own that they're submitting that FCAC didn't submit. And you know, and that's great because it really is a team effort, and you know, we're not so arrogant in California to think that what works here is going to work everywhere. But we know that a lot of the stuff that we do does work, and you know, it can help. And if we can get more testing on products and develop better products for use in homes that are in wildland urban interface areas, then we're certainly going to try and help do that and bring those people into the fold, so that ultimately we have a code that makes everybody in the country safer, especially as places like Colorado or Oregon or Washington have bigger fires that they may not have necessarily had in the past. So a lot of the proposals that we have are kind of in that vein and trying to kind of go along with that. And if you've never been in the Wildland Urban Interface Code, it's really kind of a strange code in that you apply it over other codes. So there are things that are in the other codes that you need to apply, but how you apply them in a wildland urban interface area might be different, right? So you can imagine that a cedar shake roof in downtown Chicago isn't really a big deal, but you put it in Grass Valley, California, and it's a much different problem. And so when we look at the code and using it as an overlay code, we did a lot of work to try and make things match. And that's where particularly Chapter 5 is kind of the construction provisions of the Wildland Urban Interface Code. And there's a table in there, Table 503.1, that talks about construction types and how do you apply that in the Wildland Urban Interface. And it could be confusing because when it talks about construction types, it's not talking about the same construction types that you have in Chapter 5 of the building code, for example. So we did a lot of work to kind of change that. And what do you have to do and when? Is a shed as important as a ADU, an accessory dwelling unit? Like, these are all things that we took into consideration for this particular table. And we had a lot of discussion on this. As you can imagine, the American Wood Council was involved, the insurance industry was involved, we had fire agencies involved, and everybody else, the vent manufacturers, the garage door opener manufacturers association. Like, we had all of these people that were part of this, and everybody had their own interests and their own things. And some of the conversations were super uncomfortable. This was one of the groups that I was co-chair of, so I was on almost all of these calls. And it was a really interesting process to go through, and listening to people and what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it, and you know, trying to one of the things that we went into great detail of, which was a Chapter 5 thing, is if you are coating your house, the outside of your house, in wood, like if you were going to use fire retardant treated siding, at what point does the fire retardant treated need to be tested to? Like, if you're just mounting this thing onto a wall, do you need to test the backside? And I don't think a lot of us ever thought about, do we need to test the backside of fire retardant treated wood? Because if you look at the fire retardant treated wood standard, it doesn't have to be attached to the backside. You don't have to test the backside. Well, we know in the wildland urban interface that fire can get up into that interstitial space, particularly in the 0 to 5 foot zone, where you've got the embers that then roll up against the bottom of the building, and fire can spread in that way. And we knew from our experience in California that a lot of that stuff was ways that we lost houses because we weren't paying attention to that. And so, that was a thing where it's like, okay, well, we know this is a problem. How do we fix it? And how we fix it and the concerns of the wood industry, you can't discount that kind of stuff because they're looking at it of, we coat all kinds of houses in wood siding, and this isn't always a problem. So how do we fix that in this case without outright banning it, right? I think it's easy for fire service to just say, we just shouldn't allow it, period. The exterior of all these buildings should be non-combustible. Well, if you're living in, the Rockies, do you really want a house that looks like it's completely non-combustible from the exterior in the middle of the forest? You didn't go there for it to look industrial. You went there to look like it blends into nature. So how do we do that but still make it as safe as we possibly can? And that was what a lot of the cleanup of Chapter 5 and Table 503.1 was all about. Another thing that we noticed, so California was undertaking a change in the glazing standards in the wildland urban interface. We know from our experience that windows and doors, that when they fail, that there's a lot of problems that are caused because of that, and we lose a lot of houses because of that. Anytime there's a fire that we lose structures in California, the State Fire Marshal's office has a team of people with help throughout the state with damage inspectors. And we go out there and we try and identify why it is that it failed and whether or not it met our standards, what we call 7A standards for construction. And so we get a lot of data on what failed and why it failed and what we can do better. And glazing was one of the areas that we noticed that this was a problem. And so luckily the State Fire Marshal's office with Crystal Sujeski, who is the acting chief of the Code Development Unit for, and I'm sure I butchered that, Wendy, sorry. But she's the acting chief of that division, and she brought it forward and said, hey, we've got this proposal, maybe we could get this through FCAC. And so we started making those connections, and we actually got the glazing and fenestration industry involved, and they made some great changes, and we came out with a really strong proposal as it applies to that. And so making sure that people don't lose their houses because the glazing isn't installed correctly or needs to be installed differently in a wildland urban interface situation. And it really is a strong proposal. That's probably one of the ones that I'm most proud of that we went through. The next two are another one that we know is a problem, and we identified this. So the Tubbs fire, the Camp fire, the Carr fire, which was all three of those fires were kind of the big ones in 2017 and 2018 fire seasons, and we lost a lot of people in those fires. One of the areas that we had identified here in this state was that garage doors were potentially a problem. We lost several people who died inside of their garages because, as you can imagine, particularly if a fire started because of an electrical utility problem, the power is out, right? Well, how many of you have ever thought about if the power is out and a fire is bearing down on your house and you need to evacuate, and you're going to evacuate in your car, and you go into the garage, and I think everybody on this call probably has a garage that is absolutely pristine. You don't store anything in there except for your car. If you needed to get to that little rope that's on top of your garage door, that's above your vehicle, to disable your garage door so that you can lift the garage door yourself and get your car out, you guys could all do that in a hurry, under pressure, in less than 30 seconds, right? I see some of you smiling, and I'm assuming that you are like me, where you've got a very small garage with very little clearance on either side of that. It's a single car garage that was built in 1954 with a guillotine style door, and I've got an SUV parked in there, and I can't really get up. Like, I can't even get a ladder between my wall and my car to be able to get there and do that, right? So California actually changed its state law to say that if you've got a garage door and you live in a wildland or an interface area, you actually need to have a battery backup for your garage door. and that needs to do certain things. And in California, we have a certain number of cycles that it has to go through and that kind of thing. Well, we brought that up as a potential code change proposal that we were going to run through FCAC, and National Association of Home Builders was opposed to it immediately because there were no standards for battery-operated garage doors to use in an emergency situation. And do we need to have it so that it has to work for so many cycles? And what are we going to do there and all that? And we kept going down this rabbit hole of, we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it. It shouldn't be done. It shouldn't be done. And I remember the conversation actually super clearly, because it was like we kept coming up with all of these different reasons why we shouldn't do it. And I finally was like, okay, we know that over 30 people have died from this particular issue. And so you're telling me that as a garage door industry, as the Association of Home Builders, as people who live in these areas and know what these problems could possibly be, and knowing that you may only have 1 to 5 minutes to evacuate and get everything out, get you out, get your pets out, get the things that you can grab safely out, get your family out and away so that you don't die in a fire and you aren't delaying your evacuation. Like, we can't solve this problem. Here's a case where we talk about in the code all the time that, yes, the code is written in blood, right? Here, we actually have deaths that occurred because of this, and we can't solve this problem. So luckily, we all came together. We came up with something. We are very clear on the intent in the proposal, and so hopefully that'll go into the code and commentary language so that people really understand that this is like, when you're talking about this, you're talking about this is literally a chance for life or death, and we're giving you the best chance possible. And at that point, if the fire's bearing down on you like that, like this was another one of the arguments, like we shouldn't do it because if you leave and you can't get the garage door back down, the house is going to burn down. Okay, well, what do we want? Do we want the house to burn down with the people inside of it or the people outside of it? Kind of seems like we ought to get the people out. So let's do that, and then we can fix the other stuff later. But let's save people first. Let's do that piece of it. Do no further harm. Like, they're going to lose the house anyway, so let's do that. So that was what we did with that particular one. The other one that was one of those things that was like, and this one was much less controversial, but it was kind of a duh moment. Where we were like, hey, what about the gap between the garage door and the floor of the garage? Like, what happens with that? We know that embers accumulate down there, but we don't do anything where we specify that that gap needs to be very, very small or non-existent. And how do we do that? And how do we do that in a way that doesn't use combustible materials, right? Same thing with the sides of the doors and the top of the door, right? To a lesser extent, but if you've got glowing embers and you've got a gap that's a ½ inch between the garage door and the framing that goes around the garage, like, that's a problem, right? Because now embers can get into the garage, and now if you have that garage that's borderline hoarder, and you're going to be on the Discovery Channel for a thing that's going to be unflattering to you, like, how are you going to do that? And so that one was very, very simple, and that was an easy fix, but it's going to have a big impact in saving homes in the wildland urban interface. And then the last one, and this one was one of those, again, this was a last minute proposal, but it's one of those things where we actually started on our first day, we started talking about this. So if you spend any time in the Wildland Urban Interface Code, you will have seen the term fire resistive vegetation, right? Well, what the hell is fire resistive vegetation? I have not ever encountered stuff that won't burn if you get it hot enough, right? And I think we're probably all in that same thing. So, like, I think intuitively people know that, for instance, a eucalyptus tree is generally a bad idea. An Italian cypress is generally a bad idea to have up against your house if you live in an area where you could have a wildland urban interface fire, right? So, but the term fire resistant vegetation, like, okay, is it 1 hour rated? Is it 2 hour rated? We, in the fire suppression world, we have 1 hour fuels and 10 hour fuels and 100 hour fuels and 1,000 hour fuels. Well, that's a pretty specialized thing. And I wouldn't expect that a contractor is going to go out and look at this tree and then figure out, is this a 10 hour fuel or 100 hour fuel or 1,000 hour fuel? And it's going to change over the lifetime of the plant anyway, right? So the term fire resistant vegetation, like, all of us were like, man, we hate that term. We got to figure out a different way to do it. And here again, Crystal Sujeski, and a big shout out to her because she brought forward a proposal and said, what if we called it fire smart vegetation? We know that there's vegetation out there that's better, that performs better in fires, that isn't going to ignite as readily in fires. Redwood trees, for example, is a great example, right? Redwood forests don't really burn. And when they do burn, it's always the duff and the understory that burns. It's not generally the trees themselves. We don't get crown fires there. And, generally speaking, it can certainly happen, but it is very, very difficult to get that to happen. And that's why those trees have lived for literally 2,000 and 3,000 years, right? But we get a forest that has a pine die-off, like up in the El Dorado National Forest, where there's a bark beetle infestation and there are whole groves of dead pine trees up there. Like, that's a much different fire problem. The fires that we had a couple of years ago, and I'm blanking on the name of that one now, Caldor. Sorry, the Caldor fire, like that burned through that area. And, I knew that there was tree die-off up there. I had a buddy who lived up there, and I had told him, I was like, man, I'd be scared for you. And luckily his house survived, but one of our dear friends at the state fire marshal's office, a wonderful, wonderful lady who's now a deputy fire marshal for them, lost her house in there, and she's still in the process of trying to rebuild it. And it's one of those things where we all know it's the problem and we're trying to fix the problem, and but we can't fix an entire forest ecosystem. But what we can do is make it easier, so maybe the houses will survive. And so this fire smart vegetation idea was kind of along those lines, and trying to kind of change the mindset of things and not go with fire resistant because we know it's still going to burn. But how can we plant smarter? How can we do the defensible space smarter? How do we construct buildings so that they're more fire resistant, but also maintain the vegetation and all of that? Which brings me to kind of the last thing that we did. So one of the things that we noticed about the Wildland Intermittent Interface Code was we had all these requirements of what you have to do when you're building a structure, but then we didn't say anything about maintaining it. And so we're actually going to add a chapter to the Wildland Intermittent Interface Code that is the maintenance chapter. This is what you have to do to maintain your defensible space. This is what you have to do to maintain your construction or your vents or your glazing or what have you. If it has to do with wildland intermittent interface protection when you build it or when you're proposing a development or what have you, you also have to maintain it. And now there's a chapter that'll actually tell you to do that and how to do that. So that's kind of the big thing there about how we approached it, what all those 120 proposals are, and kind of where we're going with all of that stuff. Kind of the next steps here are kind of we're in a break period. That is mostly to keep Beth sane. She was literally working up to, I think you and I texted at about 8:30 my time. So that's 11:30 your time, and proposals were due at midnight my time. So, so I was worried about whether or not she was going to get enough sleep and all that kind of stuff, because I can't fly all the way across country to wrap her up and bubble wrap, but I can do all the things in the meantime to try and bubble wrap her as much as possible figuratively. And so, so we're in a break period currently. The next step really will be when the monograph comes out, we'll need to look at that, see if there are competing proposals, if there are things that we need to possibly change and work on as far as changes maybe that we didn't get to, or we started ruminating on something and now there's a problem that we didn't anticipate. So we may need to, at the committee hearing, make some changes and that kind of stuff. We're going to review all the proposals and discuss what our positions are on them. We kind of triage that, so we actually won't talk about all the proposals, every single one of them. And as I think Carl was mentioning, I can't remember if it was on this meeting or a different one, but several thousand proposals, and so we're not going to get to all of them. But FCAC's a pretty influential group, and we're going to get a lot of people who come to us and say, hey, we're going to propose to do this, and we'd love your support. What do you think? And we're either going to politely decline, or not so politely decline and tell them what all the problems with it are. And then we'll come up with positions and we'll triage it and figure out what is most important to us, and make sure that, there's not going to be a proposal that undermines something that we did in a previous code cycle, or even in this code cycle that we're trying to do. And so that's one of the things that we're going to do, and then figure out who's going to testify. I think one of the things that I always joke with Mike O'Brien about is like, particularly when we were doing mods, is like, oh, is this another O'Brien too? Yeah, great. Thanks, Mike. That's what I wanted to do in the code hearing, is hear you talk again. And I'm certain that with as much crap that I've given people on that exact issue, that I'm going to get the same crap thrown back at me. Being on this side, I probably should have thought that more through when I agreed to be the chair and when I was giving people a bad time. But we've got a lot of people who are just literal experts in their field. Bob Davidson, for example, with the battery stuff. Bruce Johnson, when it comes to the WUI stuff, is great. Jason Smart with the American Wood Council has some great stuff that he's written for us that I'm sure he's going to want to talk to. And it's good not to just hear from me, because it's probably easy for somebody to go, oh, here goes Robert again. He's just, it's all him, it's all him, it's all him. And I think one of the strengths of the FCAC, and one of the reasons that we are able to do as much as we're able to do, is because we have such a strong correlation with all of the industry and all the different stakeholders, and making sure that we're doing all that stuff. So I think that that's super important, and having a lot of people testify is really the way to go about doing that. So
Robert, one of the actual doctors in the room has a question for you that's in the chat.
Sure.
I am not one. I just play one on television. So
close enough.
So do I, Carl. So it was in reference to the WUI maintenance chapter you identified. I must acknowledge I've been sort of behind the 8 ball and didn't realize this was coming. Is this going to outline a specific requirements for what an inspection should include? I was trying to remember if I had the Public Resources Code citation correctly or not. I was trying to research it quickly.
Yeah, you are in the right area. I think we generally refer to 4290 inspections, but the actual requirement might be in 4296. I'm not positive on that. But so in answer to your question, though, Matt, no, it isn't currently. What we basically did was we went through the fire code, the International Wildland Urban Interface Code, and looked at all of the different things that were in those codes that were either existing maintenance things that were already in there, or things that needed to be maintained that didn't have a maintenance requirement. So for example, Chapter 5 had a whole bunch of stuff on how you're going to build a structure, and like this one piece would say you have to maintain, it has to be maintained in accordance with this chapter. Well, this isn't a maintenance chapter, so why would you ever go back to that chapter? Because the scoping actually said, if you're building a house, here's what you have to do. And so somebody who wasn't there for the construction of the house would never be in that section to know that there was a maintenance requirement there. And so we took all that stuff and moved it into the Chapter 7 of the International Wildland Urban Interface Code. We talked a lot about, though, about exactly what you're asking about, which is the mitigation inspections, and how do we do that? When do we do that? Why do we do that? And I believe that we do have some requirements that we move forward. I know that we talked about it, and I just can't remember if the proposal actually made it all the way through or not. But it is definitely something that needs to be addressed. And I think in large part, what we tried to do with Chapter 7 was not do a lot of substantive changes, but get it in there, and then we can make the substantive changes later, because there still is a lot of work that needs to be done in the Wildland Urban Interface Code in particular. But so great question, but no, I don't believe that we did anything with the inspection provisions. It's more of the maintenance of what we required you to do to begin with. So, and if anybody else has any other questions, I can. I'm actually pretty adept at looking for raised hands now on the different things that we do. That's one skill that I was able to get out of this whole out of this whole deal. So kind of fun. But anyway, so I guess the last thing, and then again, if you guys have questions, feel free to throw your hand up, and we'll go after those questions. But I think the biggest thing now from here on out is the process has changed, right? So we've got 2 committee action hearings that we have to go through, and kind of looking through all of that and figuring out, like, how do we do it? And like, when do we need to do an on the fly mod versus not an on the fly mod? We'll just leave it for the next hearing and do it that way. And I think that's, there's going to be a big learning curve, especially for those of us who have been doing this for a while. There's going to be a big learning curve on this. And, I think Beth and I are probably going to be doing daily debriefings during the hearings and talking about, like, is this appropriate? Should we do this? And I think the code development committees are going to be going through the same process. So I think none of us are really exactly sure how this is going to go. I think that a lot of us are worried about that, but to quote my favorite rock star, Tom Petty, he's got a song where he's got this beautiful line, and he says, I'm so tired of being tired, as sure as night will follow day. Most things I worry about never happen anyway. So I think that that's probably the way it's going to go. I think we're going to be worried about a lot of stuff, and then it's not going to play out that way. And we're going to have to deal with whatever the reality is of how it is. So, but with that, that's all I have to say. Sorry I took up so much of your time, but I hope you found it useful. And for those of you guys who are on the call who have been part of this, Brian Scholl, I see you on the call. I know Andy King, you've participated in a lot of this stuff, and Wendy Collins has certainly been in on a lot of these things, our Assistant State Fire Marshal here in California. Matt Hines Aldrich, you've been part of those things. Ed Kaminsky is on the Building Code Action Committee, and I know we had some joint stuff going on with them. And like, we've just got all these different people, and it's really just a pleasure to work with all of these professionals, trying to make life better for the people who actually use the code or benefit from the code. And so, we'll get through it all, and then we'll wait for Group B, and we'll do whatever we can in Group B. Fire Code Act, the FCAC doesn't have a lot to do in Group B, but certainly there are things that we're concerned about, and we'll have input on, and all that kind of stuff. So, so that's where we're at. So, Beth, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to add, or Carl, anything you think?
No. Well, one thing about you reminded me of the copyright stuff. I kind of forgot about I didn't forget about it. But
sorry, PTSD.
No, one of the proposals is specifically to reference out to 855 and put some language in, so we have the basics of what we want and how we want the standard to be sort of implemented. But I mean, just from a practicality standpoint, it's such a busy and fast moving thing that we can't possibly keep up anyway. Never mind the copyright issue, but we are going that direction to reference that particular standard. And I think there's going to be some growing pains over the next, and Robert, you alluded to it, like how we've always had fire codes. One, we can't keep up with everything changing so quickly. And two, I mean, in general, some of the stuff we have is very outdated in some of the chapters. We have to decide how we're going to address some of that stuff going into the future, and how much we reference out, how much we keep in, because if you don't put it all in, you're missing a big piece. But do we really want to reference everything out? So there's some philosophical things that it's not going to be solved this cycle per se, but I think that we're going to experience over the next couple cycles on where the fire code heads. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of you have probably, if you wrote code change proposals, even if it wasn't part of FCAC, you guys have probably gotten a little bit of a preview on this just in how we write the codes, right? The cost impact statements, like we spent a lot of time talking about cost impact and how does it apply and what do we need to write and what's too much detail and what isn't enough detail and what do they mean by that? And, so all of those things are things that, and it's important, they're important conversations as much as they can be a pain in the butt to talk about. It really is an important conversation. So yeah, it's all super important. And I don't know if all you guys saw the important announcement, the major announcement that Carl Fippinger has in there, but Crystal, I see that you are on the call now, and I don't know if you were on earlier, but congratulations, Chief. That's very, very cool that's official now, so congrats.
Thank you, Robert.
Robert, thank you very much for all that information. I'm still trying to decide on the first meeting of jamming it all in with this good information and still trying to keep a meeting on schedule. But I think great information to share and very applicable to what we all do. So thank you to you and to Beth for taking the time to update us on the work that you guys have been doing. Yeah,
my pleasure.
We're good. We'll try to fly through the rest of this. I know a couple of us I know suppose they have a 3 o'clock that we might try to get to, but first I'd like to just take a quick minute to thank Christine for her service as the chair and her leadership. I hope I can do as great a job as she did, and I'm pleased that she's still going to stick with us and provide guidance through the coming months. Any additions or corrections to the agenda at all? All right. For the approval of the minutes for our December meeting, I'll take a motion if so appropriate.
This is Kelly, so moved.
Okay. For a second?
I'll second it, Doug Nelson.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Guys have it. All right. And if we could do a quick 2023 work group update, and we'll start with member engagement. Brian, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'll just keep it brief. Our first meeting for 2024, well, obviously 2023, we had several really good presentations, such as these that we just had this afternoon. I'm working on, actually I finished up a spreadsheet that has all of our previous presentations going back to 2020. So I'm going to get that sent out to the group so that everybody can kind of see where we've been and if there's anything we need to revisit, and then work on getting things set up for the rest of 2024. Our meetings are the third Tuesday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern. So with that schedule, our next member engagement work group meeting will be February the 20th. And the plan for that meeting is to try to sketch out the rest of 2024 with regard to topics and presenters.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Any questions at all? Emerging issues and trends.
Good morning.
Marshall,
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, sir. I'll make this real quick. We have a meeting on Monday at 3 o'clock. I noticed there's like 60 people on this call today, which is a great turnout. Anybody who wants to join the Emerging Issue and Trends work group, just let me know and I can add you to our list. It's a great group of people working on emerging issue and trend topics. And we have a lot of fun in our meetings. They last about an hour. I will be emailing everybody here our 24 goals. Also, I have my schedule all made out for 2024 with the dates and times. And I will be forwarding you all the most current updated PowerPoint program we have about emerging issue and trends and how we work with the other work groups. So that'll be going out to everybody. So I look forward to seeing everybody on Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock and we can map out 2024. Thank you. Great presentations today too, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate the update. Public awareness, Kelly.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We have not had our meeting yet for January due to personal vacation time. So I'll be getting on the stick and scheduling that here over the next week or two. I'm actually out of the office and out of the state here beginning of next week. So it probably won't occur until the end of next week and or the very end of the month. But in that, we'll be reviewing our annual report information from last year taking a hard look at our goals for 2024 and getting that draft document firmed up, and look at the subjects that we want to try to tackle as far as articles and who are the appropriate audiences they need to go to. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Sounds good. Thank you. And training and education, Mark.
Thanks, Sean, and hello, everybody. Just a few quick updates. We also have not met yet this year. We typically meet on the first Monday of every month at 2 p.m. Central, so we'll get some invites out for those, but some stuff we've got coming up. So as we've talked about in past meetings, we're working on some webinars through the ICC's Learn Live program. Our first one is scheduled for March 6th, so it's coming up on us quick. We're going to get some information put together here real quick for the folks at ICC and get that publicized so we can keep it moving. It will be on carbon monoxide safety with Sharon McNabb. Just today, I talked to ICC, and we're going to help them out with a fire code update class on May the 8th, so we'll get some information out on that. And then looking to claim some dates later in the year just for some other fire code topics. So that's where I'll ask for ideas and help. If you've got ideas for 60 to 90-minute classes, we'd like to get some more of those put together so we can continue to get more fire code content out there for our fire service folks. Liz also shared with me that they're going to send me a call for proposals for this year's ICC annual meeting, and they'd like for us to submit some ideas for that. Once again, kind of in the 90-minute range, so please reach out. If you've got a topic in mind or something you'd like to offer up for the group, submitting on the behalf of the Fire Service Membership Council gets some bonus credit when we put forth those proposals. So I'd be open to any ideas. Would love to get them 2 or 3 on behalf of the Fire Service Membership Council so we can keep contributing in that way. So I think otherwise that's about all I've got. If I didn't say it before, our next meeting will be on February the 5th, 2 p.m. Central. I'll work with Carl to get our meeting invites put back out there for the year, and I'll probably communicate with our working group before then so we can get these webinars lined out, but that's where we're at.
Sounds great. Thank you. So a lot of good information comes out of our work groups, obviously, and all the people are here today. Just please give some thought to jumping in and getting involved in specifically to one of the work groups and getting on the other meeting, just so we can continue to show great value as a membership council and the governing committee. So Director Metz, if you could share some comments from the board.
Thank you very much, Fire Marshal Toomey. We'll be very brief. The board is actively working on an ad hoc committee right now for the recruitment of our new chief executive officer. For those of you that have not heard, Dominic Sims has announced his retirement. That is a huge undertaking for this board to evaluate who the best leader is for us for the next decade. So a lot of our board members have been tapped with being involved in that process. And as we move through, eventually the entire board will have an opportunity to be involved. But that's a huge undertaking for this particular board, one that most boards don't have an opportunity to do. So we're taking that very seriously. In addition to that, we're looking forward to the first meeting of the new battery ad hoc board that Christine and Carl will be leading from a staff perspective. I'll be serving as a board liaison with Director Hampton. And we think that the group that has been compiled will do a lot of really great work and move the issue forward for ICC. Building Safety Month is coming. The information is on our website for our upcoming theme, Mission Possible. This year it is a 5-week Building Safety Month. So start looking at that and see how the Membership Council is going to play a role in that process there. Fire code is out for 2024. It is available in our bookstore for purchase of loose leaf and soft cover, and it has been uploaded into the digital format as well. So that was one of the codes that was coming towards the rear of the 2024 cycle, but it's available now. We look forward to seeing you all in Orlando. I just got the schedule for the board and for your guys' activities for membership councils. And I hope that a lot of you will choose to stay and participate in code hearings after that. So a lot of things happening in 2024 already. And I do see two of my other board members, Director Hyen and Director McDaniel are both on, and I will defer to them to see if there's anything else that they'd like to highlight there.
Thank you, Director Metz. This is Director Hyen. Chairman Toomey, congratulations on your new post in this. I think you'll do very, very well to lead this membership council. I think Director Metz kind of covered all the bases for us. One thing that I know has been interesting for a few people has been a kudos board that's been posted. It's an opportunity to share what ICC has meant to you for its 30-year anniversary. So I'd certainly encourage everyone representing their organizations, their fire districts, to go ahead and post to that and share a little bit of the work that's been done in this in this collaborative nature. But otherwise, I would turn over to Director McDaniel.
Sure. When you go last, everything's already covered. Randy always does an excellent job with updates from the board of directors. But Chairman Toomey, I also wanted to say congratulations and good luck to this group, and hopefully see everybody in Orlando.
Thank you both, and thank you for the three of you for being here and taking the time. Quick, I guess, report for me is I'm really looking forward to the coming year. Started to reach out to the chairs of the work groups to make sure we have a good plan moving forward. Myself and Vice Chair Neale are going to be reaching out to the members just to make sure everyone's good for their commitment to the governing committee. And I think the real trend for us is to make sure we can continue to show value, as I mentioned before, to the board and to ICC in general and to our stakeholders. I think there's a good information sharing opportunities from both sides. And, I know I've found tremendous value over the last couple of years as I've gotten more involved in some of this national stuff to bring it up and then bring it back down to our state. So I hope everyone has that equal opportunity and is able to join us for the meetings, both the in-person meetings and the virtual meetings. So I'm going to take quick, I think that's it for me for this meeting, just because we're tight on time. But Vice Chair Neale, do you have any comments?
No, welcome. Happy New Year, everybody. Started another great year. Looking forward to supporting Sean and keeping the fire service moving forward. So real quick, I know the board recently approved the membership steering committee. I will continue to be involved with that. I know we're in the process right now of setting up our first meeting, which looks like it may be sometime next week. So as that continues to move forward, I will keep everybody appraised, and we'll go from there. That's all I got.
Thank you, Tim. And staff liaison, Carl.
Hey, all my stuff was really covered by a combination of folks here today, including Robert and Randy. So I want to thank them for that. What I really wanted to do here in the time that I had was to introduce Christine Reed for just a couple of minutes. Christine is going to be helping us as a ICC staff coordinator for the upcoming Battery and Energy Storage System Ad Hoc Committee. So we're really glad to have her on board, and I wanted her to just be able to give you a quick report on the first meeting of that group and what's planned, so that you can reach out to her or myself and become an interested party if you're not part of the committee. So Christine, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. So the kickoff meeting for the ad hoc committee is going to be next Thursday, January 25th, 2 p.m. Eastern. We had a lot of applications come through for this ad hoc committee, so there was some time that was taken to select the committee members. Unfortunately, we couldn't have everybody. So those that for the meeting announcement that I just sent out are for the committee members, as well as those that applied that as interested. We're making them interested parties. So I know some of you are on the call. So if you weren't selected for the committee and would like to still attend as an interested party, I've included you already as an optional attendee to the meeting. So please feel free. If anyone else would like to submit your name and contact information to be an interested party. My ICC email address is chreed. So as Carla and I say, treed, chreed@iccsafe.org. Go ahead and email me with your name, agency, and at least your email address, and we'll get you on the interested parties list for the emails to go out for the meeting announcements. But other than that, we have a kickoff meeting. We're still coordinating and planning having monthly meetings. So we'll see how it goes next week, and I'll have a better report next meeting.
Great. Thanks a lot, Christine. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you. Everyone's going like Mach 3 or whatever it is right now, so losing a bunch of people. I appreciate everyone. I know we jammed a bunch in today. I think we lost our building membership council rep, I believe, if that's right. Is there anyone else that can report out on that, or?
Nope, I'm still here.
Oh, you are? All right.
Yep.
Sorry.
It's okay. I will be fairly brief, though. Mark Roberts is now the new BMC staff liaison. Bill Nash is going to move over to help Allison. Going to be helping the community, the membership council steering committee, basically most of the committees are getting formed and getting started again for the year, much like the committees here, and the IRC and the IECC are kind of held up because of the appeals to the energy code, and in February there will be some hearings on that. Moving forward to try and solve the appeal issues. And with that, I will pass it along back to you.
Okay, thank you. On community and outreach, which is kind of turning into the steering committee, I don't know, Tim or Allison, I don't know which one you want to jump on that.
Yeah, like I said, the building membership community outreach subcommittee is going to be probably moving away. It will become more involved with the steering committee. I think at the next building meeting, we'll have a better outline of how that's all going to happen and moving forward.
Allison, any extra there? Are you good?
No, I think that you all have responded, but if there are other membership councils on here, I do want to mention that Bill did send out to the chairs and vice chairs, or if they've selected someone else to serve in their place on this committee, a doodle poll, and it looks about half the folks have answered to first start getting together the committee. So if you want to go back to your membership councils and let them know if they haven't had an opportunity to answer, I do see some folks haven't, and the first meeting should be at the end of January here. So thank you for the opportunity.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anything from Global Membership Council? I didn't think we might have lost. I go back to my notes. ELMC. I see Lisa. Did you want to provide an update at all? You're still with?
Yeah, I'm here. We have not met yet this year. Allison, do you have anything otherwise?
I know that the last meeting that we had, we were talking about standing up efforts related to Building Safety Month, as well as the Vote for Your Codes, and just encouraging participation. I know that the Fire Service Membership Council, as highlighted by your speaker today, is very involved in code development. And so ELMC is interested in continuing to promote that effort to get people to come out and testify, to get people to vote. So I'm sure if there'd like to be some combined efforts or outreach on social media or other things to get more new folks to the table, as was mentioned in many of the meetings, ELMC would love help and partnership on those efforts, especially to bring lots of different folks from across the country to participate.
Good, thank you. Any ongoing business that we can think of? We didn't have any on the list, but anyone has anything? If not, as far as new business go, the ICC Leadership Week and our in-person meeting will be in April 6th and 7th. Carl's sent out to save the date, and more information will be coming out shortly as far as hotel block and all that information. But really hope that everyone can join us. It's one of our 2 opportunities, obviously, to meet in person. I think it's a great opportunity. And as Joe always heard, if you can stick around for some of the other activities, that'd be as good as well. The other opportunity we have coming up is there's a couple of seats at CFSI, which is end of April. They moved it to April 29th and 30th. If you have interest in potentially joining at the CFSI dinner and symposium, please email Carl and I. Carl will probably be sending out some more information, but just send us a note of interest, and we'll look to finalize how many seats we have available at the table and who's available, and try to figure out who can represent us at that dinner, which is a great opportunity. And the next meeting will be February 15th at 1:30 Eastern time, and that will be in virtual. And any questions, comments, or anything go to the order? Not seeing anything. I want to thank you guys for sticking it out. I know we went a little bit over today, but I think it was pretty important to get those that update at the beginning of the meeting. And if you have anything between now and next meeting, please feel free to reach out to me or to Carl or Tim Deal, and we're happy to get some stuff on the agenda for the next meeting. And we'll be touching base with the chairs of the work groups to kind of help move things along for the coming year. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Deal.
Tim.
Second, Adams.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for sticking it out, and we'll see you at other meetings or in a month.
Thank
Good.
you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.